I'm Tom Madrecki, Vice President of Supply Chain and Logistics at the Consumer Brands Association. Really excited to have you join us today for our Industry Solutions session, Automating Yard Process and Creating Visibility with the Contactless Pickup and Delivery Standard. This series provides overviews of broad topics that are top of mind for CPG professionals. I want to go through a couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. Everyone's line was muted upon entry to reduce background noise. If you have a question during today's session, please submit it using the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. We've saved time at the end of the session for your questions, so please feel free to raise those and we'll try to get back to you on those. Just to provide a quick overview at the outset of today's session, and then we can dive into the thick of it. Paperwork and excess documentation have slowed down supply chains and information sharing for far too long. And just as electronic documentation has revolutionized the medical records industry and others, the Contactless Delivery Standard provides a similar opportunity for supply chains in CPG and retail especially. These changes are making it easier for drivers to get in and out of the yard, increasing throughput, reducing labor needs, and providing companies with better data that can be used to drive efficiency. I'm pleased today to introduce our speakers who will share the benefits of automating yard processes and highlighting results from a CPG company that has implemented these technologies. Joining us today are Will Chu, CEO and co-founder of Vector, Chris Adderton, Vice President of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, Jeff Cowan, Senior Director of Community Engagement of GS1 US, and Don Wermerskirchen, Senior Manager of Supply Chain for Coca-Cola North America. And Don, I apologize for butchering your last name. Thank you all for joining us today to share your expertise. The floor is yours.
Thanks, thank you very much. Excited to be here today. Let's go to the next slide, go to some introductions. Again, I'm Chris Adderton with the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. Will Chu, CEO with Vector, and Don with Coca-Cola, who'll talk about the actual experience today, and Jeff Cowan with GS1, who's been in the instrumental in supporting this initiative. Next slide, please. Some background on the agenda, and then I'll get into the rationale. We're going to discuss the challenge of the day with pickup and delivery and the historical challenge that's been confronted. The big issue that really prompted this was the impact of pandemic and how it even made this more difficult to maintain secure environments going forward. We're going to talk a little bit about what is contactless pickup and delivery, and we're going to talk about the standards of creating the interoperability, which is essential, and then the impact and the advantages that were created through the application and adoption through Coca-Cola. The pandemic was the catalyst that put this group together. Not only the group that's on the call today, but early adopters that wanted to test this concept to address a business issue that was creating significant risk in the profile of maintaining operations and minimizing the risk of human-to-human interaction going forward. It created the urgency to eliminate paperwork and keep the truck drivers safe and products flowing through the network at the pace we all needed to address some significant issues and disruptions. Together with GS1, CSCMP, Coyote, and the CBA, we developed a standard that we believed was easier to implement than a full-blown independently developed standard going forward. And with Consumer Brands leadership, they spearheaded the task force to begin to build awareness, to prove the technology worked, and then to ultimately get into a place where we can adopt this technology, not only in individual corporations, but broadly across the industry to harvest the benefit. One of the things that came out of the early discussions was some research from the academic community and supply chain. And Dave Carell from MIT highlighted the fact that there really wasn't a driver shortage. There was really a utilization shortage when the average driver was at 11 hours available to drive, but was actually only moving 6.5 hours. His analysis from his early research showed that if we can simply pick up 15 to 20 minutes of dwell time, reduce that dwell time, we could significantly reduce the backlog that we have relative to the driver shortage and address this driver utility as the path forward. The early benefit not only to safety from this the pilots we established, but the productivity we gained proved that this is truly possible. With that, I'll turn it over to Will Chu, and he'll talk about the process to build the standards and to get us to the point where we are today.
Thanks so much, Chris, and thank you all for spending the morning or the afternoon with us. Really excited to share our progress and to share what we've been innovating on with the partnership with Coca-Cola, with GS1, with CBA and CSCMP. As Chris was alluding to, it's a driver utilization issue, and the hardest or the most time-consuming parts of supply chain are at the endpoints. It's the pickup and delivery that take up the most amount of time. Something I've been thinking about, there's been a lot of attention directed towards autonomous trucks and vehicles. And I think that's great. And I think there's so much exciting stuff that's happening in that arena, but it's actually, the pickup and delivery piece that's the hardest, that needs a lot more automation and needs a lot more visibility. Driving point to point, that's probably the easiest part of a driver's day. It's the arrival at the facility, either at pickup or delivery, that's the hardest. And I think if you visit any one of these yards, it's pretty apparent how manual and human powered it is to make a pickup or delivery. There's a lot of paperwork exchanged. There's a lot of waiting in line. There's a lot of trying to look up information on paperwork. And so, this initiative was originally spurred on by the pandemic, but I think what we've seen is the digital way has allowed for greater visibility and efficiency. And it really boils down to a resourcing issue. We're all competing for the same resources. Drivers are competing for dock doors, they're competing for space, competing for forklift operators and shipping clerks. And because of all this contention, there's a lot of waiting around, there's a lot of back and forth. And with digital pickup and delivery, what we're able to enable is a digital connection between the truck driver and the facility. And the facility, because of that digital connection, has advanced visibility of what's coming in on the truck. They have access to the bill of lading, but equally important, they have access to the driver. And that communication goes both ways. Drivers today, they also want visibility into whether or not their appointment's going to be ready. So oftentimes we talk about visibility from the facility perspective, but drivers, oftentimes they'll go to a warehouse and, they're running behind, or there's not enough space, and they're going to have to wait and sit out somewhere, either in the yard or outside of the yard for their appointment. And so if they're aware, 6 hours ahead of delivery, if their appointment's still on time, they can better plan their hours. They can better manage their HOS, and when they arrive at the facility, be a little happier when they arrive. And so, from the facility perspective, so often the facility plans on drivers being there at a certain time, but we all know that logistics is a world of exceptions. And oftentimes drivers don't make their appointments, or somebody's early, right? But the world that they plan for based on the appointments doesn't exist anymore. It's no longer the reality. And so loads that were staged near dock doors are now being shifted back so that they can allow another driver to come in. And that further reduces the amount of resources that are available in the warehouse, causing a chain reaction, slowing all the other drivers and forklift operators down a little bit. And something that I want to emphasize here is that the driver experience is so much better. And in a second, I'll show a video of a driver arriving using digital pickup and delivery. And this is at one of our customer sites. And this is probably the far end of the automation spectrum. What you're going to see here is a video of a driver entering a facility with the digital yard pass. And it's allowing the driver to skip chatting with the welcome center. So the welcome center is no longer involved in this arrival or this check-in. The driver can self-arrive and open up the gate, and it's providing the facility with the same amount of information as they were before, but they're actually getting it faster and they're getting it digitally. Oftentimes when we go to facilities, it's a wedding guest book where drivers are signing in and signing out. But here they're getting a digital record and they're getting it much sooner. They're getting it once the driver, in this case, crosses a geofence a couple hours ahead of arrival. So I'll go ahead and play this video.
Right. This point, you have to open it. Just pointed at the QR. You got your door assigned. Yeah. Gate opens. Continue. Yes, sir.
Not too bad.
All righty. Thank you.
Better than sitting there an hour and a half trying to get in.
I appreciate you.
And that's huge for a driver. And it's huge for the facility as well. I was just sharing that I just got back from a trip from Ontario, California, which is, probably 30 miles away from the desert. And it is hot. It's 100 degrees. And the welcome center, the guards, using this process are no longer needing to walk in and walk out of the welcome center in 100-degree heat. It's saving them a bunch of time. It's allowing them to process more drivers faster. And because we're collecting all this data and it's digital, we're able to track the milestones during pickup and delivery. We can track how long it's taking the driver to get in and out. We can track how long it's taking the driver from the geofence to arrive at the facility. And this old adage, right? You cannot fix what you cannot measure. I think when we look across the yards that we serve, there's a ton of room for improvement, especially around efficiency. And so the first step of even digitizing the process is making huge inroads in creating a plan to figure out how to make the yard a lot more efficient. And Jeff, I'll turn it over to you here.
Great, thanks, Will. So at GS1, for those that aren't familiar, we are a standards organization, and our role in this whole process is bringing to the table things that have and can be identified in a standardized process. So things like the facility, the carriers, the shipment, and things like that. We have standardized labels for each one of those. And we work with companies to show them how, if they identify those particular components, they can capture them either with the scan of a barcode, a QR code, things like that, and then share the information back and forth. And generally speaking, most companies are already using some form of this identification. So if you think along the lines of a global location number, or GLN, serialized shipper container code, an SSCC, or sometimes known as a pallet label, or even a GTIN, a global trade item number, which is commonly the product itself. Those are all identifiers that are globally unique, they're standardized, and they're being shared within organizations across not only the US here, but also across the globe. So it was important to bring that to the table and point out that these identifiers, most likely they're currently used, can be used in this process, and they very easily support it. So it's not like you have to go reprogram something and start from scratch and relabel or rename a whole bunch of different pieces of it. The information can be shared through EDI, electronic data interchange. So things like a load tender, a shipment ID, shipment status, that again, most companies are already sharing amongst themselves. And because it's standardized, it makes it very easily exchange or interoperable across the various systems.
Thanks, Jeff. And here's an example of that. When we think about data, it just like Jeff alluded to with EDI, you're reusing a lot of the same components, but we can take it one step further and allow for other channels. So far to, SMS. Drivers today, they get inundated with a lot of different technology, including apps, and allowing them to interact with the facility over low touch, low bar systems such as SMS or text messaging eliminates a lot of that friction in communication and onboarding. So when we think about data, we're really thinking about how to reuse that data, how do we integrate with existing channels, and how do we distribute and socialize that data in a meaningful way. And we've put this in practice at a number of our facilities and customers. And I'd love for Don to share his experience with contactless at Coca-Cola.
Thanks, Will. Hopefully, I can give you some insights from what we've done. Everybody's probably going to do it a little different, but I can give you some input from what we've done. And one of the big call outs that I've had is we just implemented a location last week. So fresh off of that implementation, we learn from each location that we implement. So the biggest part of this is the change management with the carriers. It's the carrier starts it all. So us as shippers, working with those carriers, getting those carriers to feel comfortable, whether they're using the application on their phone or their tablet, or they're using the SMS. It's one thing that the more places we do, the more time we take with the drivers. For example, last week we trained about 17 to 20 drivers that were local drivers for the facility. It's sitting down with them. It's only 5 or 10 minutes, but it's taking them to explain to them what they're doing, what the benefits are for them. It's the old adage, it's the whiff and what's in it for them. What do they get out of it? And what we've done from a driver check-in standpoint is we've tried to implement a couple of priorities, right? This is all about, originally it was about COVID, right? Keeping the distance, keeping people away from each other. But we've done it, how does this help the driver? How do we help expedite the driver in and out? It doesn't do them any good to be sitting around for long periods of time. And it doesn't do us any good to have them sitting around for longer periods of time. It's to get, them loading, get them out and get the product or the items delivered to the customer. So spending that time with the carrier, it helps us from a standpoint, just getting things going. So that's one of the things that one of the priorities we always look at, we default to what does it help the driver do? Our idea is expediting the driver in and out of our facilities. We don't want them there hanging around forever. So we always default back to that when we're working into our plan. And then one of the other processes that all important proof of shipment, right? It's digitizing that so we don't lose pieces of paper. We have that proof of shipment. We can share that proof of shipment with anybody that wants to be on the end, the carrier, the driver, and the end receiver. So it's definitely helped along the way. And we keep the driver in mind, keep the carrier in mind as we go about all these different processes and making sure that we can help expedite them. With the shortage of drivers, whoever you want to listen to or talk to, but it's the time on road available for them to drive, just like Chris was alluding to earlier. And then change management, it don't want to sound like I'm repeating myself, but there is change management, and the better you prepare, the better conversations on what you're trying to accomplish and the people involved in those. From our fresh off the experience of last week implementing at one of our facilities is, we have dedicated drivers at this facility, and this is who we implemented with. And you'd be amazed at how receptive these drivers were, men and women, on taking the time out and explaining it to them. And they had the option of putting it on their tablet for the company they work for, or putting on their personal phone, because nobody's going to dictate on one or the other. 90% of the drivers wanted to put it on their personal phone. It was just easier for them to use their phone instead of using the tablet. It's the same information going back and forth. but it's, it's giving them that option. And we had an option for them. It wasn't mandated by the carrier or us. It was which one do you feel more comfortable with? So that was one of the call outs that we noticed. Our own internal shipping clerks, right? So from a Coca-Cola North America standpoint, we've got dock coordinators that are been doing stuff, and we don't even know why we're honestly doing things. Sometimes it's just we've been doing it that way for so long. It's like why we don't know any different. So you implement something new into them, and then as we were training these shipping clerks on the 24/5 operation, it's what's in it for them, right? How do they operate differently? And one of the things to show you how ridiculous some of the things that we do, and we don't look at doing things differently because we've been doing it for so long, is these dock coordinators, once the loads were closed up, they'd be walking 50, 60 yards to go give the paperwork to a guard and then have to walk back. So, I mean, it's saving them just walking around the warehouse. They could operate all this information and exchange the information with the driver from their desktop or from their iPad, whatever they're using at the time. So that was a call out. It's a different getting them to new routines and adjusting to that. That was a big call out. So we've had great success there in the first week that we've done it. Is it perfect? By no means. It's one of those things that you're going to continue to evolve and get better at. So, and then from a security guard standpoint, whether it's at the receiver or if you have a security guard at your facility, we've got paperwork going back and forth. Paperwork gets lost. You wouldn't believe how much paperwork gets lost between whether it's the guard or the shipping facility or wherever it's at, right? The driver knows, where the load's at now. I'll show you in the next couple of slides that we've implemented some changes along the way. We've mapped it out from the facility map. So the vector teams helped a lot with this, right? So we know our processes. We think we know our process, but when you have somebody from the outside looking in at it, they offer suggestions based on the other CPGs and customers that they've worked with. This has worked at this place. This hasn't worked. Maybe it works better over here. But it's taking a look at it. I mean, we've got just the facility that we implemented last week is different. There's no guard check. They have to walk into the building. But the other one we did, we have created a fast pass lane. So how can we create a fast pass lane for these drivers that are checking in digitally, and not have to have them come in and get the piece of paper, drop their truck, do everything, and walk in. So saving them time, saving them frustration. If there's long line on drivers, the guard then has to find their paperwork. We've tried to keep their processes the same at the plant, but try to help them refine it to make it better and easier for everybody, for the driver, number one, and then for us as number two. So as we say, our North Star is that how do we make this better for the driver to get them in and out and get them more productive?
Oops, sorry.
Yep.
I think
Go back one.
Yep.
And this is I was talking about the fast lane, right? We've created from our experience of implementing at other facilities a fast lane for where it's feasible, where we've got additional lanes on the inbound. If they've checked in, all they do is do a stop, wave, and they go. It's not, they're not getting out of the truck. They're not, say, which pickup number do you have? One of three numbers. A lot of that stuff at the gate and the backups at the gate have been reduced. And the biggest benefit we've seen, and it kind of alludes to the whole part of it, right, is that the dwell time has been reduced by 48%, just from the driver having to park, walk, whether it's 20, 50, 100 yards into the shipping office, go back and forth, stopping at the gate. There's multiple areas where wasting the driver's time is really what it comes down to. We've been able to do a light integration with our WMS on that, and we've seen huge benefits in the reduction of dwell time. And this last location that we've done is the Ville lost trailer. So at the location we just implemented, we've got a plant and then we've got a warehouse down the street, which I know a lot of people have, is, based on how much product you have. So what we've been able to do is modify this to put where that trailer is. Once it gets loaded at the warehouse, it can get moved to the plant because the plant has more room to store trailers than the warehouse does. So all this information is in there. So when the driver's checking in digitally, he doesn't have to call the yard shifter, which they're currently doing, or they were doing, calling, where's my trailer at? Because where did he move it to? Now when they check in, it'll tell them it's at the plant or at the warehouse. There's no indecision and, you know, get moved from place to place back and forth. So this was a huge enhancement for this location where we've got separate warehouse and a separate plant. And then one of the things that we've built into from our end on a compliance end is the seal verification. We have, whether it's a driver or a guard, depending on the setup at the facility, taking a photo of the seal with the number. It's reading off the seal number and comparing it to what's on the BOL. This has helped us stop from trucks going down the road at, you know, 100 miles down the road. Oh, you got the wrong trailer. You don't have the right BOL. So it's helped on that way. It's caught things before issues happen when you get to the receiver, and now you've got a seal that doesn't match and probably not the right product either. So this has definitely been helping with our compliance stuff. So it's helped out a lot. And that's all I have. Well, key takeaways, or Tom?
Thanks, Don. Tom, are you there?
Yes, I am. No, and I think that the question is whether we would go to questions first, but we can certainly do a couple of quick key takeaways, and maybe that'll prompt some interest in the question and answer portion. Again, if folks want to submit through the chat, that'll help us just gear everything up. But I mean, I think at the highest level, and I've been privy and obviously a core part of helping launch this project to the Consumer Brands Association for a long time now, in 2+ years almost of work under our belt, and have seen the growth from excitement around helping keep folks safe during COVID, as Chris mentioned at the outset, to then really some of the efficiency plays, and then the potential to transform yard operations and really impact the whole of like how we do business. So I mean, I think that if I'm looking and thinking about key takeaways from just today's session, I think the first and the foremost thing that everyone has to be aware of is that digital pickup and delivery, at the end of the day, it just increases efficiency and it increases visibility. I know that Will hits on this point, but I really think that that's a baseline new best practice, right? That the elimination of paperwork, and it's common sense, but that at the end of the day, this is an efficiency play, it's a visibility play, and that if you can overcome some of the potential hurdles, some of the change management issues, elevating this within your organization, that's going to spell clear benefits in terms of getting people in and out of the facility, ultimately putting more capacity back on the road, and hopefully just making for an increasingly frictionless supply chain. The second thing that I think that has been raised by this group, and I know that just a big piece that hit on, but that this is a standard and a process that builds on existing GS1 data elements. I think that that's a critical piece of this too. This is not something that is like wholly out of thin air. This is tried and true things based on data standards and elements that are common across the industry and can be hopefully readily adopted, made ready for prime time. And then the third area, and I think this speaks to the opportunity going forward, is that if you are a CPG or a retailer and you're considering this, you're maybe on the fence about it, that there's a pathway to getting involved. Chiefly through the Consumer Brands Task Force, would love to have new members be a part of that, or if you're an existing member, to be re-energized by it and to come back in, maybe pilot some of this technology with us. You can learn more about the Contactless Standard at our website. That's contactless-standard.org. But that there's I think, video, some of the standard and some of the documentation spelled out on that site, but it provides a good, baseline resource going forward to learn more about it. But with that, I think that we may have some questions potentially geared up. I'm just gonna turn things over maybe to Amy, if Amy is on. James.
Tom, Q&A, it's all you today.
All right. Just going on the. So I think that, just looking at, go through here and pick a couple. Let me start with Don and Will from an initial implementation standpoint. Provide some context for this group about what's really involved in terms of getting started, right? So we know that there's a standard, we know that the technology exists, this is a best practice, but practically, what were sort of the needs on Coca-Cola's end to get up and running? And then Will, maybe you can walk folks through how sort of like Vector approaches a company like Coca-Cola and gets them up to speed. But wonder if you guys can start with that.
That's
Well, you want to start?
Yeah, that sounds good. And sorry if I take over, if I reiterate some of the things that you said. But it really starts with understanding the facility, really mapping out the processes around pickup and delivery. So something that Don showed in his presentation, that facility map, understanding the roles and responsibilities of the welcome center, of the inbound clerks, of the driver, the yard hostler. Once we understand the processes and how information is exchanged, then we can start digitizing that flow. So the next part of that is digitizing that flow. And then it's doing some UAT testing, user acceptance testing amongst those different roles, refining the workflow, doing the integrations, and then doing the training for a go live. It depends on the facility, but we've seen go lives in as short as about a week, where there's no integrations necessary. So we can do from soup to nuts in about a week, but usually it takes about 3 to 4 weeks on average for a go live.
And then from what it's taken us to do is we visit each location with the Vector team. They map it out just like Will said. And the first time was it depends on how you want to get your information uploaded, right? The BOL and stuff like that, and what systems you're on. Will and his team can pretty much configure anything. It's just a matter of how many firewalls and how much our internal IT people want to share and stuff like that. So that's more of a challenge from our side, where we have like a light SAP around the backdoor implementation, but it works for right now. So we continue to see if we can get a hard line wired into it. It's just massive, trying to get Coke to move in that direction. It just takes months and months and months for approval. So we were able to find a backdoor way to get that uploaded and rather quickly feed from SAP. So, and then it just starts the process. It's really, once they've got that mapped out, sending us a link to put the application on the desktops or the iPads, and go forward and go for training. You can get the drivers pre-registered or not. You get the users. I mean, it's really a quick setup. We had more probably delays from our internal IT teams than anything that the Vector team had put forward to us.
That makes perfect sense, Don.
Yeah, Tom, I can expand on the questions that I get related to this from retailers and from some of the other pilot folks or people that are interested and I think the important thing is, there's 3 components to benefit. I started with safety, productivity from a labor utility standpoint with the people at the facility, and then of course, accuracy in the data that comes through. And in one of the notes that Jeff highlighted early on, it actually enhances the ASN experience. You get more information sooner with more accuracy. But the question then is, well, it always is, how do I start? And the question is, how far do I go? In the case of Coke, they've been doing this a while, but you can take this technology and apply it to one part of your current processes and still get productivity gains. You can go then deeper into the organization with your own infrastructure, which is where Coke was doing it. But then there are others that have gone downstream to the retailers and seen benefit as well. So it's not an all-in proposition. You don't have to commit everybody. Well, you can kind of talk about some of the variation between some of those things I think would be beneficial to the audience.
Yeah. And I think that maybe touches on a couple of other questions that I was going to raise in just a minute, but we have a question from Rajib Sakar. Don, was this done only for dedicated carriers and drivers? And have you tried this on e-point of delivery from your customers?
The majority of them are for our dedicated. It was trying to get the biggest bang for the bucket first, where there are local drivers and regional drivers coming in, being more familiar with it and able to train them on site. We have done it with other carriers. That's a continuing work stream, right? It's ongoing. And we've done it with a couple customers on the end customers. And, you know, they can get as detailed as they want or as little as they want. They can just receive the BOL, get it digitized and have the driver sign for it. So there's different stages on the receiver end. Our goal is to get all our shipping facilities up and running. And then we've got all the data. It's out there, right? Once we can get everybody aligned and upload all our information, all we need is one of our customers to say, hey, we wanna, you know, get this digitally. Can we do this? And then, you know, we have the vector team go work with our customers on the end, how they get it, you know, digitally, and or they can, you know, the driver can sign for it digitally. But it's up to how much they want to get detailed. But dedicated fleets are a much easier start than the broader drivers. But as us as shippers keep rolling it out to other, you know, facilities and locations, you're going to get that pool of people knowing what's going on, and it'll just help all of us in the future.
Great. Chris, you just hit on some of those benefits. I know we went through a couple of those from an efficiency standpoint. Don and Will were able to share. What strikes me, like over and over again throughout this process, and having different companies test and learn in that iterative way through pilots, is that at times, like, this almost seems like too good to be true to an extent, right? Like, and then if it is so good, then why aren't others doing it? Or why hasn't it seen just like widespread adoption? And maybe Will or Chris, Don and Jeff, of course, like, feel free to jump in here, but like, what's between us and a truly contactless future? And what do you attribute some of that lag or still like hesitancy, maybe even at times, amongst certain CPGs, certain retailers to go down this path when everyone knows that paper is going the way of the dinosaur?
That's a great question, Tom. I would say that from our perspective, we have more inbound requests than we can handle. So if anyone wants to join our team, feel free to contact me. But you know, of course, they think there are always going to be facilities that are going to be, or companies that are going to be on the outside looking in, wanting to see what other companies are doing. And I think that's it. I think another reason is, you know, we're all short-staffed these days, right? Us included. It's hard to hire in terms of resourcing, and so when there is that change management, there's a little bit of a hesitancy there. Like, is that the priority to focus on? You know, I'd say for a lot of the facilities, they're betting on the long term, and knowing that the upfront investment in automation and digitization is going to pay dividends. You know, you think about hiring a new dock worker. Being able to follow a digital flow is much easier than getting trained up on all the institutional knowledge of that warehouse. Like, when this happens, then you do that. When that happens, then you do that. So being able to digitize that and walk a new employee through the steps is something that we've seen pay huge dividends at our customers. So there's a lot of benefits, but I think for all those reasons, I don't think there's anything systemic around adoption that we've seen that has prevented us from more widespread adoption.
Yeah, I believe it's the core principles of change management, right? There's vested interests, and people are comfortable with work processes they already know, even if they're not good. Many times it's amazing what people want to hold on to. It's also a lack of understanding, I think, when you make the initial contact, that, you know, who else needs to know, what kind of approvals do I get in place? And that's why I emphasize the fact you can do this with a light touch, just improving a piece of your performance in your organization through digitization, which is where we started. But then really embracing it to see how far you could go if you didn't have your existing systems. But it addresses two critical issues that aren't going away: human capital, retention. I was just at a meeting the other day, 30% of the new hires and front-end workers in supply chain leave after 30 days, 50% leave after 90 days. The cost of training and accessing those people, great gate guards are getting harder to find and having to show up. This is what the catalyst for this was, the pandemic, which is now endemic. So some of the safety issues remain. That was the catalyst, but then it enabled us to say there's a better way to do this. And in every case, the productivity gains exceed what Dave Carell indicated would solve our problem. It really is getting enough people, number one, aware, understanding how they can start, and then getting it to be, systemic. I believe it's one of the most important industry initiatives we've found that has an immediate benefit with no failures to date. I mean, there's not many like that, but it's an enormous decentralized part of our industry that is hard to herd. It's worse than herding cats at this point in time. So that's the background of why, we're continuing to promote this not only within the CPG industry, but other industries as well, and bring awareness up and bring the partners together, which is sort of our role of connecting the industry components. And certainly, bringing Jeff's group in early to validate the fact that, using standards is a benefit. I go back to my days in the CPG world, and Jeff and I said, there's still people challenged to use standards in the core GS1 world, right? So it's mostly the human challenges, I think, Tom, that we're confronted with right now. And if we can overcome those, we actually improve productivity in the lives of almost everybody in the facility that adopts this.
Great. And Chris, your check, as always, is in the mail. Continuing to promote this as best in class. Don, a question for you, and because we started today's discussion around this concept of automating yard processes and thinking about the future of facility management and how you sort of just run your business. Where do you see contactless, let's say, not just changing and helping to automate existing processes, but then prompting new discussions about how you design a future facility, how you even envision a facility working? Like, do you actually need that guard check over there? Or do you need to design things the same way? Does it open up some possibilities for you all just to throw out everything and start from scratch, almost, like in terms of what a facility is and how it runs?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's probably one point I didn't touch on in my discussion is this gives us the base to build off of, and the data is there, the information's there. It's what can you build off of from this platform? There's so many different things you can look at, like whether it's yard management, whether it's additional, whether it's claims. We're looking at how can we facilitate claims from this portal. It's already set up, but we just don't know how we're actually going to work it, right? So I think it builds off it, and us, I know we're a little temperamental on our compliance and security, so that's a big sell for us internally. But the guardless facilities are coming. There's several manufacturers out there that don't have them, right? They have they punch you in and you come out and you got to sign yourself out. There's no guards there. There's a gate. We got lots of cameras and everything, right? So, but I know some CPGs and other customers are sensitive, from a food safety standpoint. It's making sure everything's secured and going forward. Obviously, because your reputation and brands out there, but I think it's limitless. I think there's so many different things that we've talked about we could build off of this platform to enhance and like you said, just scrap what we're doing and say, what if we could have everything we wanted? How would it look? That's my goal in this. Is there's certain things I want to look on building off of that. Claims was just one of them. How can we automate that from an end? And so you can take pictures, you can upload it to the application. There's tons of stuff instead of having the back room trying to figure all this stuff out later.
Makes perfect sense. Will, I have one more question for you, and then would welcome, folks to have sort of like closing comments or additional thoughts if y'all have any, or if I didn't hit on something that you guys want to cover. But thinking about where contactless fits in, not only to CPG, but sort of the whole of the logistics industry. I know that many of the early adopters of contactless were folks like FedEx and UPS. What do you see as sort of like leading edge in this space, or where do you see this heading? And where do you see other companies maybe pushing the envelope a little bit that can then be lessons learned that and shared sort of like back down to the world of CPG and retail and others?
Yeah, I think what Don said is very true. It's we're just getting started. Being able to now digitize the process, that's just the foundation. I think you can take it in a number of different directions. Definitely around claims, everything from OS&D to detention pay, right? It's being able to collaborate better with your vendors and your carriers. The reverse visibility piece is huge for some of our customers. Being able to remain shipper of choice by making sure that drivers know if their appointment's delayed. My flight back home from Ontario last night, I was delayed for a couple hours, but that was okay because Southwest sent me a text, 4 hours ahead of my flight. And so then I was able to grab dinner with some of my colleagues. And so being able to just express the workflow now in a digital capacity and being able to build the connections all the way down to the driver, we're going to start to see things that we've never seen before, but also make a ton of just sense. Today when we go to a parking garage, when we park our car, we don't talk to an attendant, right? And it's allowing us to get in and out faster. It's all self-service. So as Don said, a number of CPG companies are really leaning into being able to have guardless guard shacks. And one of our partners, Chamberlain, right? We're innovating with them to enable that with their existing hardware. They own not only most of the garage doors in our homes, but they also manufacture the majority of gate access and dock door controls at warehouses. So connecting to their hardware, being able to automate that, that's going to be the next big thing that we work on.
Excited to see where it heads, and hope consumer brands can continue to innovate with you all and sort of like push this forward as an industry initiative. We're really enthused by the partnership and the continued commitment from everyone on this line, as James mentioned at the start, just to this new industry best practice. So I wanted to thank all the participants today. Will, Don, Chris, Jeff, thank you for your time. Did you all have any closing remarks or just thoughts?
I'll just give my further closing commercial. And this is one of the most important initiatives to get people to begin to think about applying this technology, because it's proven in every case, as I said before, the productivity gains are there. So there's a return that's much more quick than people realize. And it addresses two of the major concerns, capacity and accuracy. The part that was lightly touched on was the charges that relate to inaccurate information or lack of information going forward.
Great. Thank you all. And for more information, as always, recommend checking out our Contactless Standard website, contactless-standard.org. And you can learn more on the Consumer Brands Association website as well. But thanks to our distinguished panel today, and for our guests for participating in today's webinar.